Get out of my office, Sergeant. Sergeant First Class James Harper stands at attention in the sterile administrative office at Fort Bragg, the scar across his left cheek catching the fluorescent light. His green beret, the symbol of everything he's sacrificed for, sits on the desk between him and his commanding officer like evidence at a trial. James is a devoted family man, the kind who coaches his son's little league games and never misses Sunday dinner. His wife Brienne knows the toll of his service, the limp from his knee injury, the nightmares he won't talk about, the prescription bottles he hides in the garage. You understand what this means, Sergeant Harper? James regularly takes steroid injections to manage the chronic pain in his knee. The alternative was ending his career years ago or living on opioids. But when a routine drug screening catches the steroids in his system, the bureaucracy shows no mercy. Despite 15 years of exemplary service, despite the blood he's shed for his country, James learns he will be involuntarily discharged. No pension. No health benefits. No way to support his family. James is stunned but maintains his composure. He salutes sharply, picks up his beret, and walks out. The door closes behind him with a finality that echoes through his chest. The weight of reality, building tension. That evening, James breaks the news to Brienne at their kitchen table, bills spread out between them like an accusatory jury. The mortgage is 3 months behind. His son needs braces. The car payment is overdue. His voice is steady, but his hands shake slightly as he explains what happened. Maybe I should look into private contracting, James suggests, knowing it's a line they've drawn together. We agreed you wouldn't do that, Brienne reminds him, her eyes searching his face. There are other options. There's real work out there with real money. Work that uses what I know how to do. But she's afraid of what that world might turn him into. They leave it unresolved, tension hanging in the air. What this teaches you, this moment illustrates a harsh reality for transitioning veterans. When the military is the only world you've known, losing your career doesn't just mean losing a job, it means losing your identity, your healthcare, and your economic security. The chew them up and spit them out culture leaves thousands of highly trained soldiers without support systems or viable civilian career paths. 2 nights later, Brienne comes home to find James on the roof at 11 p.m., ripping up old shingles in the dark. Can you come down? Yeah, I'll come down. Her voice cracks. Mason's gone, James. He took his own life. James freezes, hammer in hand. Mason was his spotter in Afghanistan. The guy who could make anyone laugh, even after the worst missions. Now he's another statistic. What are you doing up on the roof all night? Brienne asks, her concern deepening. She's terrified she might lose James the same way. I'm okay, James says, but they both know it's only half true. He's trying to keep his hands busy so his mind doesn't wander to dark places. So he doesn't become another Mason. What this teaches you, veteran suicide rates are tragically high. More veterans die by suicide each year than were killed in the entire Iraq War. The transition from military to civilian life, especially when combined with lost benefits and purpose, creates a perfect storm of isolation, financial stress, and identity crisis. At Mason's funeral, James stands in his dress uniform, watching them lower another brother into the ground. That's when he's approached by Mike Hawkins, his former superior officer, a man he'd trust with his life. Come have dinner with us, Mike says, gripping his shoulder. Family stuff. You shouldn't be alone tonight. At Mike's house, James watches the warmth of a normal family dinner, Mike's kids laughing, his wife bringing out dessert. It's everything James is terrified of losing. How'd they fit his giant butt into that uniform, one of Mike's kids asks innocently. White socks with dress shoes, Mike laughs, remembering Mason. The man was a soldier, not a fashion model. He was your dad's friend, Mike's wife explains gently. They looked after each other. After the meal, Mike and James sit on the back porch with bourbon. Mike can see something's eating at him. I got discharged, James admits. Medical. They're taking everything: pension, benefits, all of it. I've been thinking about contracting work, but Brienne doesn't want you to, Mike finishes. He leans back, swirling his glass. Look, I've done a few gigs. We're just doing what we were trained to do, except we get paid what we're actually worth. I work for a private military company now, contracts directly with the government. What kind of money are we talking about? 50,000. 2 weeks of work. James does the math in his head. That would clear his debts. Pay for his son's college fund. Give them breathing room. I'm listening. Mike drives James 3 hours into rural Virginia, where they arrive at an expensive ranch that looks more like a resort than a military facility. This is where Rusty Jennings runs his private empire. Rusty, a billionaire contractor in his 60s with the bearing of a man who's used to being obeyed, calls James into his study. James's file is already spread across the mahogany desk. Next to it is another file, older and more worn. Mike speaks highly of you. Your record speaks for itself. Rusty taps the second file. Your father's file tells me even more. James's jaw tightens. My father has nothing to do with this. Disagree, Rusty says, pouring 2 glasses of expensive scotch. Your father served 23 years. 3 tours. Purple Heart. And when he came home broken, what did they give him? A handshake and a bus ticket. He drank himself to death trying to forget what he did for this country, and they didn't even send flowers to the funeral. The words hit James like a physical blow. Rusty continues. I know exactly how the government treats men like us. They chew us up, spit us out, and expect us to be grateful for the privilege. You gave them everything, and now you're drowning in debt with no pension and no future. James says nothing, but every word resonates. I know you have offers from other agencies, nice, safe, boring jobs that'll pay your bills. But none of them will give you what you need: purpose. Fulfillment. The chance to do what you were born to do. Rusty slides a document across the desk. I work under direct presidential authority. There's a situation in Berlin: a bioterrorist developing weaponized pathogens that threaten U.S. national security. Mike's leading a blacked-out team. 2 weeks. In and out. And you're exactly the kind of operator we need. He slides a check across the desk. $50,000. Dalton will process your check. So what do you say? You down for the cause? James stares at the check. It's more money than he's seen in years. Enough to save his family. Enough to prove he's not his father, that he won't abandon his son. I'm in. What this teaches you: this scene exposes how private military companies exploit vulnerable veterans. They offer immediate financial relief and the promise of purpose, targeting men who've lost their identity and support systems. The language of presidential authority and national security provides moral cover for what are often corporate interests. Rusty weaponizes James's trauma and his fear of becoming his father, showing how manipulation works on psychological vulnerabilities. That night, James returns home with the check. Brienne is waiting at the kitchen table. It's just 2 weeks, James says, showing her the check. Berlin. Government contract. Mike's leading it. Brienne stares at the number, knowing what it means for their family. Knowing what it might cost. What kind of work? Counter-terrorism. Surveillance operation. She wants to believe him. She wants to believe this isn't the beginning of the end. But in her eyes, James can see the fear, the same fear he saw before every deployment, the worry that he might not come back to the same man. 2 weeks, she finally says. Promise me. 2 weeks, James repeats, pulling her close. Then I'm done with all of this. But even as he says it, he knows he's crossing a line. He just doesn't know how far that line extends, or what's waiting on the other side. Before we dive into James Harper's descent into betrayal, I need your help. If you're already hooked by this story, please hit that like button right now. It tells the algorithm that this content matters and helps me reach more people who love deep, thought-provoking narratives like this one. And if you're new here, subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this journey. Your support literally determines whether I can keep creating these stories. Now, let's see how a decorated Green Beret becomes a pawn in a billionaire's deadly game. The cemetery grass was still wet from morning rain when they lowered Mason into the ground. James stood rigid in his dress uniform, watching another brother disappear into the earth. 22 a day, someone had told him once. 22 veterans take their own lives every single day. Mason was just another statistic now, another casualty of a war that never really ended when you came home. Mike Hawkins found him as the crowd thinned, gripping his shoulder with the kind of pressure that said, I know. Come have dinner with us. Family stuff. You shouldn't be alone tonight. James almost declined, but the thought of going home to face Brienne's worried eyes, to sit in that quiet house with the unpaid bills stacked on the counter, made him nod instead. Mike's home was warm chaos, kids laughing, his wife bringing out pot roast, the television playing too loud in the background. It was everything James was terrified of losing. Over dinner, Mike's youngest asked how they fit Mason's giant butt into his dress uniform, and despite everything, James found himself smiling. The man was a soldier, not a fashion model. White socks with dress shoes at his own promotion ceremony. They'd given him hell for that. After the meal, Mike led him to the back porch with 2 glasses of bourbon. The silence stretched between them until James finally broke. I got discharged. Medical. They're taking everything, pension, benefits, all of it. Mike didn't look surprised. He'd probably heard. What are you thinking? Contracting work, maybe. But Brienne. James trailed off. Look, I've done a few gigs since I got out. We're just doing what we were trained to do, except we actually get paid what we're worth. Mike leaned forward. I work for a private military company now. Government contracts. $50,000 for 2 weeks of work. James felt his pulse quicken. That would clear everything. What kind of work? The kind you're good at. Are you interested? 3 days later, Mike drove them 3 hours into rural Virginia. The ranch appeared through pine trees like something from a different world, sprawling, expensive, fortified. This was where Rusty Jennings built his empire. Inside the study, James found his personnel file already spread across a mahogany desk. Next to it sat another file, older and worn. His father's name on the tab made his jaw tighten. Rusty Jennings was 60-something, silver-haired, with eyes that had seen too much and calculated everything. He poured scotch without asking and slid a glass across the desk. Your father served 23 years, Rusty said, tapping the old file. Purple Heart. 3 tours. And when he came home broken, what did they give him? A handshake and a bus ticket. He drank himself to death trying to forget, and they didn't even send flowers. James wanted to argue, to say his father had nothing to do with this, but the words caught in his throat. "I know exactly how they treat men like us," Rusty continued. "They chew us up, spit us out, and expect gratitude. You gave them everything, and now you're drowning with no pension and no future." He slid a document forward. "I work under direct presidential authority. There's a situation in Berlin: bioterrorist, weaponized pathogens, national security threat. Mike's leading the team. 2 weeks, in and out." Then came the check. $50,000. "So what do you say? You down for the cause?" James stared at the number, thinking of his son, of Brian's fear of becoming his father. He picked up the pen. "I'm in." The safe house in Berlin's Kreuzberg district smelled like stale cigarettes and mildew. James dropped his duffel on the cracked linoleum floor and checked the windows, bars on the outside, blackout curtains already drawn. This wasn't government work. Real military operations came with proper infrastructure, secure communications, and a chain of command accountability. This felt like something else entirely. Mike gathered the team around a folding table covered in surveillance photos and floor plans. Besides James, there were 3 others: Kaufman, a former Marine sniper with dead eyes; Torres, an ex-Delta communications specialist; and Davis, whose resume Mike didn't bother sharing. The kind of crew you assembled when official channels couldn't know what you were doing. "Target is Dr. Nikolai Sem," Mike said, tapping a grainy photo of a thin man in his 50s entering a nondescript laboratory building. "Microbiologist. We have intelligence suggesting he's weaponizing H5N1 avian flu for a terror network. Our job is surveillance first: document his contacts, his schedule, his security protocols. Then we extract his research and neutralize the threat." James studied the photo. Sem looked like a professor, not a terrorist. But then again, the most dangerous weapons were always built by people who looked harmless. What Mike didn't explain was how private military companies operated in this gray zone between legal and illegal. No congressional oversight. No Inspector General investigations. No Geneva Conventions. When things went wrong, and they often did, contractors simply disappeared. No body armor stamped with U.S. flags. No dog tags to send home. Just deniable assets doing deniable work for people who'd never face consequences. For the next 4 days, James ran surveillance. He learned Sem's routine with the precision that had kept him alive through 3 combat deployments: morning coffee at the corner cafe at 7:15, arriving at the lab by 8 o'clock, lunch break at 13:30, always the same Turkish restaurant, back to the lab until 2000 hours or later. The man lived alone, no family, no security detail. He was either incredibly naive or incredibly confident. James photographed everyone Sem met. Documented every conversation through parabolic microphones. Tracked deliveries to the lab: medical equipment, refrigeration units, biohazard containers. The kind of gear you'd need for virology research. But also the kind you'd need for legitimate vaccine development. On the 5th night, James sat in a rental car across from Sem's laboratory, watching lights burn in the 3rd-floor windows. His encrypted phone buzzed. Brian's name lit the screen, but he couldn't answer. OP/SEC protocols. No personal contact during active operations. He wondered what she'd say if she knew what he was really doing: not preventing terrorism, but stealing research for a billionaire's profit margins. Through his telephoto lens, James watched Sem working late again, alone in his lab, surrounded by equipment that cost more than James would earn in a lifetime. The scientist looked exhausted, consumed by whatever project drove him to work 16-hour days. Torres's voice crackled in James's earpiece. patterns established. We're good to move tomorrow night. James lowered the camera, a cold feeling settling in his gut. Tomorrow they'd cross from surveillance to direct action. From watching to doing. And once you pulled that trigger, there was no taking it back. He thought about the $50,000 already deposited in his account. About his son's college fund, finally secure. About the promise he'd made to Brienne, just 2 weeks, then he'd be done. But looking at Sem through that lens, James realized he'd never asked the most important question: what if the intelligence was wrong? What if Rusty was lying? In the privatized world of military contracting, who verified the targets? Who confirmed the threats were real? Nobody. That was the answer. And that realization made his hands shake as he packed up his surveillance gear and drove back to the safe house through Berlin's midnight streets, knowing tomorrow would change everything. They hit the lab at 2:30, when Berlin's streets were empty and Sem would be alone. James led the entry team through the service entrance, suppressed pistol raised, night vision turning the world into shades of green. The building's security was laughable: a single camera loop, no guards, just a keycard reader that Torres bypassed in under 30 seconds. Either Sem was dangerously careless, or he never imagined anyone would come for him. The third-floor laboratory was a cathedral of stainless steel and humming refrigeration units. James swept through the space with practiced efficiency, clearing corners, checking sightlines. Kaufman stayed on the door. Davis began downloading data from Sem's computers, USB drives glowing in the darkness. Mike moved toward the cold storage units, already pulling out labeled vials and packing them into a specialized case. That's when James found him. Sem was in the back office, slumped over a desk covered in research papers and empty coffee cups. He looked up slowly, blinking against the tactical flashlight beam, and James saw no fear in his eyes. Just resignation. Like he'd been expecting this. American, Sem said quietly in accented English. I wondered when you would come. Mike appeared in the doorway. Secure him. We're on a clock. James zip-tied Sem's wrists while the scientist watched him with unsettling calm. This wasn't how targets were supposed to behave. They fought, or begged, or tried to run. Sem just sat there, bleeding dignity even as they violated everything he'd built. You think I am a terrorist, Sem said. It wasn't a question. Doesn't matter what I think, James replied, but the words felt hollow. H5N1 killed 60% of those infected in the 2024 outbreak, Sem continued, his voice steady despite the zip ties cutting into his wrists. Next pandemic, maybe 70–80%. I am developing a universal vaccine, one that works against all influenza strains. Not a weapon. Salvation. Shut him up, Mike ordered from across the lab. But Sem kept talking, his eyes locked on James. You know how pharmaceutical companies work, yes? They make treatments, not cures. Treatments you take forever. My vaccine would cost them billions. So they send men like you. James felt something cold settle in his stomach. You're working for terrorists. I work for the Institute of Virology, funded by the German government and who? Check my credentials. Check my publications. Sem's voice cracked slightly. I have 3 daughters. I am trying to save millions of people. Mike's radio crackled. We got company. The police scanner just lit up. Time to go, Mike said, pulling his sidearm. He looked at James. Clean it up. James understood immediately. No witnesses. No loose ends. That's how these operations worked in the world of private contracting, the kind of rules that got buried in classified after-action reports that would never be written because this mission never officially happened. "Please," Sem said, and now James heard the fear creeping into his voice. "My daughters." "Do it," Mike snapped. James raised his pistol, muscle memory taking over even as his mind screamed that something was catastrophically wrong. Sem closed his eyes, lips moving in what might have been prayer. In the legitimate military, there were rules of engagement, legal reviews, accountability. But private contractors operated in shadows where moral lines blurred into profit margins and plausible deniability. The suppressed shot echoed like a whisper in the sterile lab. Sem slumped forward, blood pooling on research papers covered in equations James couldn't understand. Equations that might have saved millions. Or might have killed them. He'd never know now. "Move," Mike ordered, already heading for the stairs. James followed, leaving the scientist bleeding out among his life's work, and felt something fundamental break inside himself. He'd crossed lines before in combat, done hard things in hard places. But those had been war zones with clear enemies. This felt different. This felt like murder dressed up as patriotism. Behind them, sirens began to wail in the Berlin night, and James realized there was no going back from what he'd just done. The German police intercepted them 2 blocks from the lab. Not random patrol, deliberate positioning, like someone had called in their exact location and route. James's instincts screamed ambush as the first patrol car screeched around the corner, blue lights painting the narrow street in stuttering brilliance. "Contact front," Kaufman barked, already moving to cover behind a parked delivery truck. The police weren't supposed to engage armed suspects aggressively. Standard European protocols called for containment and negotiation, especially in residential areas. But these officers came out firing, and James realized with sick clarity that someone wanted this messy. Wanted them dead on foreign soil where questions would never be answered. Torres went down first, catching 2 rounds center mass before he could return fire. Davis broke left, trying to flank, but more police poured in from the side streets. Too many. Too coordinated. This wasn't law enforcement responding to a burglary, this was a kill team wearing police uniforms. "Sewer access, 50 meters east," Mike shouted over the gunfire, already dragging Torres's body behind cover to strip his gear. No man left behind wasn't about honor anymore. It was about eliminating evidence. Kaufman provided suppressing fire while James and Mike moved, but a stray round caught Kaufman in the throat. He dropped without a sound, blood spraying across cobblestones that had survived 2 world wars. James wanted to stop to help, but Mike pulled him forward with brutal efficiency. "He's gone. Move." Another burst of gunfire, and Mike grunted, stumbling. Blood bloomed across his left shoulder and abdomen, dark against his tactical vest. He pressed a hand to the wound and kept running, but his breathing came ragged and wet. James found the sewer access behind a dumpster, a heavy iron grate marked with faded municipal warnings. He wrenched it open, the stench of waste and decay hitting him like a physical blow. Mike collapsed against the wall, his face gray in the streetlights. "I can't," Mike started, then coughed blood. James didn't hesitate. He hauled Mike over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, feeling his friend's blood soaking through both their clothes. The sewer ladder descended into absolute darkness, each rung slick with slime. Behind them, footsteps pounded closer and voices shouted in German. James dropped into the tunnel, Mike's weight nearly buckling his knees. The water was thigh-deep, thick with things he didn't want to identify. He waded forward into the darkness, Mike's labored breathing echoing off ancient brick walls, as sirens screamed above them, and James understood with perfect clarity that they'd just become the loose ends Rusty Jennings needed to eliminate. The extraction team wasn't coming to save them. They were coming to finish the job the police had started. And somewhere in this filthy darkness beneath Berlin, James would have to figure out how to keep them both alive long enough to understand why. They made it 300 meters through the sewers before Mike collapsed. His breathing had turned shallow and rapid, his skin cold and clammy despite the exertion. Classic signs of hypovolemic shock. He was bleeding out internally, and without immediate intervention, he'd be dead within the hour. James dragged him onto a maintenance platform that reeked of decades of rot. His tactical medical training kicked in automatically: assess the wound, control the bleeding, maintain the airway. But down here in the darkness with no proper equipment, his options were brutally limited. "I need a transfusion," Mike gasped, his words slurred. "I'm O negative. Universal recipient." James checked his own dog tags in the dim glow of his tactical light. "O positive. Close enough in an emergency." He'd done field transfusions in Afghanistan when medevac wasn't coming and brothers were dying. The military taught you to improvise, for tubing could be sterilized with alcohol, needles scavenged from morphine auto-injectors, the human body remarkably resilient when survival demanded it. He pulled the medical kit from Mike's vest and set up the makeshift transfusion. No blood typing equipment, no way to crossmatch, just faith in desperation. James slid the needle into Mike's arm, then his own, and watched his blood flow through clear tubing into the man who'd recruited him, who'd promised this would be simple. "Why did the police know exactly where we'd be?" James asked as his blood drained. Mike's eyes fluttered. "Doesn't matter now. It matters to Kaufman. To Torres and Davis. Casualties of war," Mike whispered. But this wasn't war. War had rules, accountability, a chain of command that answered to someone. Private military contracting existed in the gaps between laws. No international treaties governed their actions, no military code of justice applied, no congressional oversight committees asked uncomfortable questions. When contractors died on foreign soil, their deaths were simply written off as security incidents that never made the news. After 20 minutes, Mike's color improved slightly. James disconnected the transfusion, his own head swimming from blood loss. They sat in silence, listening to water drip and distant voices echoing through the tunnels. "Extraction point is the old brewery on Warschauer Strasse," Mike finally said. "Rusty's team will pull us out at 4 o'clock. You go ahead, make sure it's clear. I'll follow at 10. James hesitated, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. But Mike was his superior, his friend, the man whose life he'd just saved with his own blood. "You didn't question your brothers." 10 minutes, James agreed. He moved through the sewers toward the extraction point, emerging into a decrepit industrial district as dawn turned the sky gray. The brewery loomed ahead, windows shattered, graffiti covering crumbling brick. James approached cautiously, using the urban terrain for cover. That's when he saw them. 3 men in civilian clothes, positioned with military precision around the brewery's entrance. Not a rescue team, a kill team. One spoke into a radio, and James caught fragments: "Target approaching, confirmed termination." His blood went cold. The same blood is now flowing through Mike's veins. James dropped back into shadow, his mind racing. Rusty hadn't sent the extraction. He'd sent executioners. Everyone who'd entered that lab was a liability, witnesses to a corporate hit disguised as counter-terrorism. Kaufman, Torres, Davis, all dead. And now it was his turn. But why let Mike live? Unless. The realization hit like a physical blow. Mike had split them up. Sent James ahead alone while he recovered. made sure James would walk into the ambush while Mike stayed hidden in the sewers, safely separated from the target. James touched his arm where he'd given the transfusion, felt the ache of donated blood, and understood the complete depth of the betrayal. He'd literally given his blood to save the man who'd sold him out. The man who'd known from the beginning that James Harper was always meant to die in Berlin, another disposable asset in Rusty Jennings's private war for profit. In the distance, James heard movement in the sewers. Mike, following right on schedule, ready to confirm the kill and collect his payment. James melted into the ruins and ran. James just discovered that the man he saved with his own blood is the same man who sold him out to die. If you're feeling that gut punch right now, drop a comment and let me know. Are you team Mike deserves what's coming, or do you think there's more to his story? Your comments don't just help the algorithm, they help me understand what resonates with you and create better content. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We're only halfway through this story, and it gets darker from here. Hit that subscribe button because the next chapters reveal the full scope of the conspiracy, and trust me, you don't want to miss what James does next. James needed proof. Running would only keep him alive until Rusty's next team found him, and men like Rusty Jennings had long reach and deep pockets. He needed leverage, something that would make him more valuable alive than dead. He circled back to Sem's laboratory just before sunrise, moving through Berlin's awakening streets like a ghost. The building was cordoned off with police tape, but the officers had moved on to process the scene internally. James slipped through a basement window, years of infiltration training making him invisible even in daylight. The laboratory had been ransacked. Computers smashed, files scattered, cold storage units emptied. But investigators searching for evidence of a crime scene wouldn't think like a scientist protecting his life's work. James thought about Sem's calm resignation, the way he'd talked about his daughters, and started looking for what a desperate man would hide. He found it in the ceiling tiles above Sem's office, a waterproof bag containing 3 external hard drives and a handwritten journal. James pocketed them and moved to a corner internet cafe, paying cash for an hour of computer access. The data was staggering. Sem's research wasn't weaponizing H5N1, he'd developed a universal influenza vaccine using novel mRNA technology. The journal documented everything: successful trials on primate models, preparations for human testing, partnerships with the WHO and German Health Ministry. Sem had been months away from potentially saving millions of lives in future pandemics. Then James found the emails. Pharmaceutical executives expressing grave concerns about market disruption. A universal flu vaccine would destroy the annual flu shot industry, billions in recurring revenue eliminated overnight. The correspondence was carefully worded, corporate speak hiding clear intent. They couldn't stop Sem through legal channels because his research was sound and government-funded. So they'd found another way. The final email made James's hands shake. It was from a shell company James recognized from his mission briefing, one of Rusty Jennings's countless front organizations. The message was simple: problem neutralized. Research acquired. Asset disposal in progress. Asset disposal. That's what James was now. Not a soldier, not even a contractor. Just another line item to be eliminated. But Sem had known this might happen. His journal's final entry was dated the day before the raid. If you're reading this, they succeeded. My research is sound. The vaccine works. 3 billion doses could be manufactured within 18 months using existing mRNA infrastructure. Do not let my daughters think I die for nothing. Do not let them win. James copied everything to a secure cloud server, then sent encrypted fragments to 3 different journalists known for investigating corporate corruption. Insurance. If he died, the truth would still surface. He sat back, Sem's words echoing in his mind. The scientist hadn't been naive, he'd known exactly what he was up against. He'd understood that certain truths were dangerous to powerful people, that innovation could be seen as a threat when it disrupted profit margins. And he'd done the work anyway, knowing it might cost him everything. James had killed a good man. An innocent man. Not in combat, not in the fog of war, but in a calculated execution ordered by a billionaire protecting pharmaceutical investments. That truth would haunt him forever. But he could still make it mean something. Virgil was an old contact from James's second deployment, a former intelligence asset who'd gone independent after the CIA burned him. He operated a black market medical clinic in Berlin's Turkish district, the kind of place where gunshot wounds got treated without questions and cash bought silence. "You look like hell," Virgil said, examining the cuts and bruises covering James's body. The blood loss from the transfusion had left him weak, and 48 hours running on adrenaline was catching up fast. Virgil stitched a gash above James's eye and hooked him to an 4 for rehydration. "Whatever you're into, it's big. Word on the street is someone offering serious money for an American contractor. Dead, specifically." "How serious?" "6 figures. That's termination money, not capture." Virgil handed him antibiotics and painkillers. "You've got maybe 12 hours before every asset in Central Europe is hunting you." James showed him Sem's data. Virgil's expression darkened as he scrolled through the files. "Jesus. You killed a scientist developing pandemic vaccines? I was told he was a bioterrorist. And you believe them?" Virgil shook his head. "This is why I got out. Contractors don't ask questions because questions don't pay." They heard the footsteps simultaneously, multiple contacts, moving with tactical precision up the stairwell. Virgil's eyes widened. Back door. Now. But the explosion came from the back entrance, shaped charges blowing the exit in a calculated assault. Professional. Coordinated. This wasn't street criminals, this was a hit squad. "Go," Virgil shoved James toward the window, already reaching for the pistol under his desk. James climbed onto the fire escape as gunfire erupted inside. He heard Virgil's defiant shout, then silence. Another good man died because James had trusted the wrong people. The safe house was 3 blocks away. James grabbed the emergency pack hidden in the bathroom, cash, fake passport, prepaid phone, and rigged the gas line with a timer he'd built from a cheap watch. Military demolitions training, finally useful. He was 2 streets over when the explosion lit up the night sky, orange flames consuming everything he'd left behind. The blast would destroy evidence, create chaos, buy him maybe 6 hours. James headed for the train station, Sem's data encrypted on a drive around his neck, and realized he'd burned every bridge back to his old life. There was only one direction left, forward, toward the man who'd orchestrated everything. Toward Rusty Jennings. James found Mike at a sports bar in Arlington, 3 blocks from the Pentagon, drinking beer and watching football like a man without a care in the world. No wounds. No limp. No sign of the bullet holes James had watched tear through his abdomen and shoulder just 5 days ago. The blood transfusion had been theater. The separation in the sewers, calculated. Mike had walked James straight into the kill zone, then disappeared while the extraction team finished the job they thought had succeeded. James slid into the booth across from him. Mike's hand moved toward his concealed carry, then stopped when he recognized who he was looking at. For a moment, genuine shock crossed his face. Then it hardened into something else, resignation mixed with professional respect. "You're supposed to be dead," Mike said quietly. Disappointed? Mike took a long drink, eyes never leaving James's face. It wasn't personal. You understand that, right? Just business. You recruited me. Looked me in the eye at Mason's funeral and sold me the same lie that probably killed him too. James kept his voice level, though his hands shook with suppressed rage. How many others, Mike? How many veterans did you feed to Rusty? Enough to retire comfortably. Mike's honesty was almost worse than deception. The system doesn't care about us, James. 20 years of service and they toss you out with nothing. So I stopped caring back. Rusty pays better than any pension, and the targets? He shrugged. They were going to die anyway. Markets don't forgive disruption. Sam had 3 daughters. And Rusty has shareholders. Mike leaned forward. You can't win this. He's got lawyers, politicians, black budget contracts. You're one man with stolen data that'll never see a courtroom. James placed a thumb drive on the table. Already sent to 3 journalists. Insurance policy. But I'm giving you a choice, help me finish this, or I add your name to the evidence. Full testimony about every job, every target, every veteran you fed into the machine. Mike stared at the drive, understanding the trap. Cooperate or become a liability himself. The same calculation he'd made about James in Berlin, now reversed. What do you want? Rusty's location. Security details. Access codes. James met his eyes. And then you're coming with me. If I'm dying on this, you're dying too. That's the deal. Mike finished his beer, the weight of his choices finally showing in the lines around his eyes. His compound's in Montana. Private airstrip, ex-military security, probably 20 shooters on site. He pulled out his phone. I'll get you in. But James? We're both dead men walking. Then let's make it count. Rusty's compound sprawled across 200 Montana acres like a fortified kingdom, all high fences and surveillance cameras hiding behind the facade of a luxury ranch. Mike got them through the perimeter using his access codes, but the moment they approached the main house, alarms shattered the night. They moved through the compound like the operators they'd once been, muscle memory overriding the betrayal between them. Mike took point, clearing corners with the same efficiency that had kept James alive through 3 deployments. For a few minutes, they were brothers again, fighting the same enemy instead of each other. The security team was professional ex-military contractors just like them, men doing a job for a paycheck without asking questions. James dropped 2 with center mass shots, watched them fall wearing the same tactical gear he'd worn in Berlin, and understood this was what the industry created, an endless cycle of soldiers shooting soldiers while billionaires counted profits from fortified bunkers. Mike caught a burst from an automated defense turret as they breached the main house. The rounds punched through his chest, spinning him against the wall. He slid down slowly, blood spreading across expensive marble floors. James knelt beside him. Stay with me. Mike coughed red. Funny. That's what I told you in the sewer. His eyes found James's face. We were brothers once. Before all this. Before you sold me for a retirement package. Yeah. Mike's breathing turned shallow. Tell Brienne, tell her Mason didn't kill himself. Tell her Rusty's got a list of vets who knew too much. Make sure it stops. Then he was gone, and James was alone again. He found Rusty in his office, surrounded by monitors showing the compound's burning chaos, calmly pouring scotch like minor inconveniences happened every day. The old contractor didn't even reach for the pistol on his desk. Impressive. Mike said you were good. Rusty raised his glass in mock salute. But killing me changes nothing. The company continues. The contracts continue. The machine is bigger than both of us. Maybe, James said, raising his weapon. But you won't be around to profit from it. Wait, we can make a deal. Name your price. 10 million? 20? You've earned it. James thought about Sem's daughters. About Kaufman and Torres and Davis. About Virgil and Mason and every veteran ground up by the machine Rusty represented. About his own son, and the world he wanted him to inherit. Some things aren't for sale. The shot echoed through the office. James downloaded everything from Rusty's servers, contracts, target lists, payments to politicians, and set the house ablaze with evidence scattered for investigators to find. As flames consumed the compound, he walked back to his truck and drove toward home, covered in blood and smoke, carrying the weight of everything he'd done and everyone he'd lost. 3 days later, James walked through his front door. Brienne stood in the kitchen, frozen, her eyes taking in the scar tissue and haunted expression of a man who'd gone to war and barely returned. 2 weeks, she whispered. You promised 2 weeks. I know. James pulled her close, feeling her shake against him. It's over now. All of it. He'd executed the men responsible. Exposed their corruption. But standing in his kitchen, holding his wife while his son slept upstairs, James understood the real cost. He'd become the monster he'd feared, a man who solved problems with violence, who'd crossed lines that could never be uncrossed. The war was over. But James Harper would never truly come home. And that's how a soldier fighting for justice becomes the very thing he feared. If this story made you think, made you feel something, or taught you something about the darker side of private military contracting and how our veterans are exploited, please show your support. Like this video if you made it to the end. Comment below with your thoughts. Did James make the right choices? Could he have done things differently? And please subscribe if you want more stories like this, ones that entertain while revealing uncomfortable truths about the world we live in. Every subscription, every like, every comment helps me grow this channel and create more content that matters. I read every single comment, and your engagement means everything. Thank you for taking this journey with James Harper. Until the next story, stay sharp, stay questioning, and never stop seeking the truth.